My name is Michael Wood. Since the age of 17, I've been willing to die in service to my community. In the U.S. Marine Corps, I was Sergeant Wood.
Michael Wood spent 11 years in the Baltimore Police Department.
Michael Wood is a very honest individual. He was not liked by the Baltimore City Police because he didn't play the good old boy network game.
As my career developed, I set out to understand why people offend, instead of how they offend.
The reason why these consent decrees don't do anything is because there's no enforcement or changing of the mechanism of incentives for the officers. So all you're doing is talking about it.
I certainly was going to cross. I was ready to shoot if I had to, but I was never going to cross that line.
But you kind of wanted to shoot.
Sure. Get what you inspect, not what you expect. So, or anywhere that's populated, is your metric is based off of arrest. So you don't actually go out and engage with the community, because that would be time that you could be getting the arrest that you're expected to get to prove that you're a decent officer. So you actually don't have any incentive to communicate.
Michael, we should be looking for goals to not have people end up in the criminal justice system. Instead, every solution we have is to push them into the criminal justice system.
It should not be up to Jeff Sessions to determine how Baltimore Police Department operates. It should be up to the residents of Baltimore. Jeff Sessions doesn't know anything about policing, never has and never will.
I want to read a quote that you gave the Washington Post, which struck me. You said, "When you work in policing, you're inundated early on with the us versus them mentality. It's ingrained in you that this is a war, and if someone isn't wearing a uniform, they're the enemy. It just becomes part of who you are, of how you do your job."
What I'm trying to say is that we are looking at people who are doing nothing new, and if we focus on the actions, then we can fix the things for next time. Because when you focus on people, we end up thinking we can chop the head off, they put a new person in and something will change. But if we don't focus on the methodologies and the institutions, then we will be
put them in a prison cell, do the paperwork, go back out and do it again. So what we really need is to change the incentives and disincentives so that no matter what the role, we're still going towards that objective that actually serves.
More occupation, more vehicles, if your answer continues to be violent, because we have to understand that everything about policing is inherently violent. I have come in there with authority and told you what you will do.
Like, eventually you're like, I've done everything, I'm fucking done.
Yeah, you would run out of shit. That's why I have a joke that I do on stage where it's that's why people really have kids, is they're bored to shit. Is, well, I don't know what else to do. So you just have a kid, and then now you're like, well, now this shitty job has meaning.
Right, that's a good point. Now I'm going to work for a cause that is bigger than myself. Good point. I like that perspective. Right. You got to do something to give it meaning.
Yeah, seriously, man. I was a therapist long enough, man. I know what they really think of their husbands and wives and kids, man. I'm serious. I heard them. I know the truth. I know what you mean. That's why I don't have any kids, man.
All right, well, keep it that way for now, I suppose, but I will say that having my daughter was probably the best experience of my life. I'll say that for sure.
Oh, man. That's all right. You have to say that. You can't. No,
no, I mean, she knows me enough that, I would let her know if that was not how I felt or believed.
You're a terrible child, and I have to let you know that.
Yes, absolutely. I've actually never let her win at games, and that's always been a big deal to her. I won't let her win at shit. So when she finally got to the point where she was 14 and she started beating me and things, those victories were meaningful, they were actual. She knows she earned it.
You can't, man. You can't be the dad that lets them win everything, man, because then when life actually gets them one time, right, they don't know how to pick themselves up, man. Make them earn that win.
Right. She's tough on her own, though. This one time she broke her arm in gymnastics, and she had a field trip she wanted to go to. So she just put that shit in a t-shirt sling, went to her field trip, and then came back and went to the doctor's the next day.
Oh, whoa. Whoa.
I'm not missing my field trip for
my
a stupid-ass broken arm.
God. All right. I like that. Now, that's some dedication. I like that. You're like, no, I'm going. Yeah. Broken arm and all.
She went. She's tough. Now she's a weenie, though. I don't know what happened. I guess we all get there eventually.
COVID has turned us on. No, I'm kidding.
No, maybe.
I'm kidding. I'm just kidding, man. Sort of. Not really, man. So how have you been? It's been a while. You've now become a doctor since we last spoke.
This is true. And I guess that's always a point of where things go wrong in anything that I talk about. Because, where things really went is I thought we had a movement that was talking about how to change society for the better. And they wanted to have solutions, so I worked really hard at trying to find solutions. And then I think I realized that nobody actually wants solutions; they just want a bitch. And so,
Oh, all right.
um,
Yeah, I mean, because you were part of that movement, man, back when you spoke out. And so what's the doctorate in?
business management. The whole point of that is I had this like kind of direct pathway where I was a cop, and I'm realizing our outcomes are kind of shit. Like, I mean, even at a basic level, I'm in Baltimore right now. Believe it or not, somehow crime is higher in Baltimore than it's ever been. I have no, like, we can get into that, but I thought that was something that was going to be impossible considering the way national trends are. But I'm in Baltimore where I'm standing here, and it's like we're doing the same things for the last 30 years, and nothing's changing. We have some low valleys and peaks and valleys, but there's no consistency. There's nothing actually saying that anything we do actually is improving these neighborhoods. If anything, there are kind of really tangible ways in which we are harming a community. For instance, we can look in the data and we can see that a very strong correlate to crime and violence is a fatherless home. But yet I'm out here running a drug war that's kind of taking fathers out of a home for really no real reason. So how can we object to these things are right in front of our face. So I thought, okay, we're ineffective. What do we need to do? So then I started my master's program in business management with IT. And for some reason, I was thinking we had like some technology issues at that time. Like we didn't have a lot of communication issues. That's been something since 9/11. That's been talked about a lot. So I thought maybe there was communication issues, like dissemination of information. So I did all this IT stuff, and then I ended up going inside headquarters, and I was doing these things where I would have all this crime intel being broadcasted out to the district so that they had all this information. That didn't do anything either. That was dumb. And, so
But you don't know, right?
Right,
You
so
gotta
you keep
be willing
trying.
to
That's
try
what it
things,
is.
man.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure it helped in some way. Officers liked it. I know that much. So then I started just really seeing it as a managerial issue. I've always had a problem with this kind of concept that policing is intentionally racist. I mean, I can explain to you racial outcomes, but for me to look around and see two black cops on my left and two white cops on my right, and people to tell me that this is racism when my entire chain of command is black people. So even all the white people are working for black people, I'm pretty confused about this racist tone. So I know we're talking about something else. We're talking about how employees running in an organization respond. Why do we think that police are the one type of employee that doesn't follow the rules of every employee in the entire world? So I started to focus on how we incentivize and disincentivize managerially what we're doing in our policing. Wanted to find out reasons why, better pathways, things like that. So I mean, I did.
You took a business management aspect instead of a military approach,
Right.
and really broke down and looked at things from a managerial standpoint rather than say a talking point, right? Or something maybe the media is driven home as being a reason for change, right? Or revolution, or what that change really is. Or even how that change would take place, right?
Right.
I like it. It's a lot more logical aspect to take a look at where some changes could happen.
And come to find out, pretty much the business world has answered all these questions long ago, and anybody like me from a policing background is really late to the program when it comes to a lot of these ideas. So I started putting these business managerial ideas together that they've long proven. I mean, for example, we can all, no matter what side of the spectrum you're from, you can say, hey, Exxon has this business model that maximizes its gains for its shareholders, no matter what is going on in the rest of the world. This is an isolated environment. This is the community of the shareholders of Exxon, and they will cut the throats of everybody else in order to maximize gains for their shareholders. Why the hell can I look at any old neighborhood like a bunch of shareholders and apply that to their police department and how they influence that? So I did that. I created a model called civilian-led policing using the best organizational methods that we have available in the business world right now. I'm not saying they're the answer, saying they're a hell of a lot better than what we got going on, but that you keep improving these things and we keep looking for the best answers. So I went and I pitched that all around to a ton of different cities and a ton of different activists. And what really happens is you have people that are saying, we have this problem, and I am saying, okay, great. How do we solve this problem? And we say, okay, we find out, you do research and you find out you need 7,000 signatures on a ballot and you can get any reform passed that you want. Okay, great. So then they say that's too difficult. But then I see them go to a protest the next day with 20,000 people in attendance and not a single person with a clipboard in their hand actually trying to make the changes that were easily there. So I kind of pretty much gave up on that pathway.
So, I mean, what you're saying is you're bringing something that's logical. It's a policy change that easily is implemented, and it gets ignored because it's not a show, because there's not a show of it or something. It's just not. It seems too logical, too easy, too.
Well, I think I'm getting out of my realm. I think that's getting into a psychological realm, something to do with mob mentality and how people respond to things like media, victimization mentalities. I just, like those are the answers that I need, but that is way outside of my field of expertise. So I kind of feel stuck in that.
So you had a kind of an idea of bringing a civilian force, but not really a force in a way, but more of I don't know, caretaker something, being responsible for your community kind of thing.
Right, just like how Exxon is. That people actually have to buy in. So what kind of metrics are buy-in for an actual community? Well, it's not somebody that just got there. It's somebody that's been there for a long time. So I put qualifiers. So I want it to be like a lottery. So it'd be a lot of anybody from the citizenship can get in charge of the police department. Generally, you're talking about 7 to 9. 7 makes more sense. Of a board, and it rotates. It has all these checks and balances, but the basic procedure and idea is it has to be an invested community member, somebody that has been there, cares about this community, understands the nuances of the community, and then they become the decision makers on a board determining what the police will do. And you listen to people like me who will sit there and argue with you about different methodologies, how this would turn out, what the history is, and you talk to professors in public health, because really this is a public health issue, it's not supposed to, but that's different. And we start dealing with those things so they can make changes for simple processes like most things that you see going on right now with like, say, a ballot initiative to legalize cannabis. I mean, that's pretty much a given these days. So, and there's areas where you still can't do that, but any place could have told their police department a long time ago, we're not enforcing these laws, period. There's nothing wrong with that. Police have 100% discretion. So it's like you can even circumvent any laws that exist from a higher authority. You can't circumvent your low laws, but if the federal government says that cannabis is illegal, the local cop can say, yeah, so what, whatever, that's fine. It's called discretion. So we can do all these things where you're actually in charge and you're responsible, but I also have come across this hurdle that I think being responsible is a big problem. With great power comes great responsibility. And for example, my research broke down into ethics areas about communal and individual ethics, and this is another area where this comes in a lot, is if I'm saying to the community, the officers need to follow what you determine is ethical, what your policies and procedures are, forget what their individual beliefs are, because the current system is legally the officer is allowed to base their judgments for something like deadly force based upon how they feel, literally their emotions.
Yeah, officer discretion and how you feel at the moment that you need to defend yourself is based on that individual as opposed to a top-down approach.
Right, and I think that that's fine for the individual. It's just like how the individual wants vengeance for a crime. That's fine for the individual to want vengeance, but for the whole of us, our community, our society, vengeance cannot be a model that we're based off of, just like punishment as a deterrent in policing can't be something that our whole model is based off of. So, but what happens is let's take Derek Chauvin and killing of George Floyd. So here's the problem. If you make policy and procedures and that cop kills somebody following your rules, that's on you. There is no punishment to get from the officer. There is no blame to be had on that officer. And if we find out that someone like Derek Chauvin was trained in that exact technique by the policies and procedures that are there, that is a blame on the community, not a blame on the officer. When the officer breaks your rules, then that's a problem, and you can judge that officer. So that is this whole, whether it's a cop or a regular person, we have this juxtaposition where I don't think most of us are grounded in whether we believe in individual or communal ethics. Who determines what is moral? Us as individual agents or our community? I don't know where I go with that argument, but I know when it comes to police officers, they're employees and they need to act by the ethics determined by their organization.
Yeah, and a top-down approach to push that forward. I know a lot of, I'd say I know a lot of sheriffs or leaders, right, take over a department, right, they initiate their law and order. There's I forget the guy's name, down here in Florida, out in, I think, Lakeland or Lake County, something like that. He's pretty known as like, we all have guns, we'll shoot you. You know, he kind of employs his own thing, and own methods, if you will, or ideas or philosophies. And what you're saying is, by that happening, you could curb possibly some violence, right? And somebody responding to methods currently in place that get people killed.
Right. And well, see, with the sheriff, you're kind of in a tough position as well. So a sheriff is a representative. It's actually, I mean, I would argue a sheriff is the best example that we have in American policing of a direct pathway from the people. So this guy, when he's breaking his rules, he is essentially breaking state and federal rules on behalf as a representative for his community. So, I mean, with a good sheriff, a lot of what I'm talking about really does take place informally. But I'm not interested in systems that depend upon individuals. That's kind of what we do as a whole right now. We have really bad systems, and then we say, but, you know, it's worked out so far. Yeah, I mean, pretty decent people, for the most part, have found their way into the decision-making process or have been around to say, you know, stop really bad decisions. But, I mean, for example, you know, we were lied into a war by the people we just elected president. But anyway. And you know, we're getting lied to the media constantly, and people fall for things. So I mean, I don't even know. I feel like I've learned a lot about pragmatism, and I think I don't think that's a way I usually would have thought before. But things, especially
how much of our society are we still stuck? It seems so archaic, right? That you do something, we lock you in a box, right? It seems really primal, right? And then, but a lot of people make the argument, let it be your daughter, right? Let it be your mom, right? And then, I'll be the first one to kill him. I think that's why you brought up the vengeance part, right?
Individual ethics.
But when we look at those, but it does seem so archaic in a way that even the police officer job itself seems, terrible, right? Of like who can take that job, who would perform well at that job, what would make somebody better at that job, right? Kind of talk about kind of what you discovered then, being an officer yourself, right? And then also trying to take I love your new complex. Thank God someone thinks outside the box to let a community think or police themselves, right? I love that idea, questioning new concepts of policing, but that experience, man, of what it's like trying to be a cop. How do you get around maybe having cops, right? Is that even an idea, right? What training or pay? How do you fix that impossible job?
Well, you're gonna have to keep me on track to follow that couple of steps there, because
you got it. I knew you got it.
I'm gonna branch way off into some bullshit that goes all over. But when it comes to being a cop, I realized, I mean, immediately in the academy, that nothing there was preparing anyone for anything serious that was about to that could go down. I mean, here we are in a very violent city where you are going to be responding to people at their worst for the most part. So this requires somebody that's going to obviously very level-headed and calm at the least. Very physically skilled for the most part, you know, at least survivable, or so other people don't get hurt, you know, in some way, shape, or form. And nothing there was preparing me to do anything. The Marine Corps had prepared me. If it wasn't for the Marine Corps, I wouldn't have been able to shoot. If it wasn't for the Marine Corps, I wouldn't have been level-headed. If it wasn't for the Marine Corps, I wouldn't have had confidence to deal with situations. It didn't have shit to do with what was happening in the police department. So obviously, military people and the militarization of police, that would send us off on another tangent, because I'm sitting here saying that the military is what made me a better officer. But I would also argue that it made me a better officer under this condition that we have on what a police officer is. And I don't want to come in and say that this is our society. I'm not coming in here and say that your vision of a police officer currently is wrong. But what I'm going to tell you is the idea of what you have of a police officer. I think they're like quarterbacks in the NFL. There's simply just not enough of them to go around for everybody to have one. And I think they require such levels of training and education that you're not having somebody even hit the street without a doctorate. Before you're even beginning to be able to be, I mean, think about what the society is really expecting a cop to go from completely calm situation, handling your mother, to going literally chasing a suspect down the street with a gun and not acting improper at all, to going to a kid who just got her head chopped off in a car crash, to go into a domestic violence, to then handling a nice calm burglary report, and then having nothing happen for 5 hours until suddenly, boom, they're literally, got to rush to a fire and pull somebody out in the middle of the night. I mean, I had days like that. And the amount of stress that you're dealing with and the amount of skill necessary, I'm not saying I had it. I got lucky. I didn't have it until I was 10 years under the force before I would have begun to tell you that I was remotely capable at doing my job. And by that point in time, I was literally in charge of the entire Eastern District on shifts. When you watched The Wire and you said, who's the head cop around, that was me at 26. That's retarded. Right? So
yeah, I'm going to lean toward that. You give me a badge and a pistol at 23 or 26, I would have made some terrible decisions. I mean, I did already. I agree with you. I've often said that the position we hold cops in and officers in, at a time, I remember a little younger, right? Oh, as a cop at your elementary school, you're like, hey, man, is almost a superhero, right, in a way. And they've come from these superheroes to these villains, really, in a lot of eyes, right? Without a concept of what they deal with on a daily basis, what they really go through, right? Mm-hmm. And I've often said that, man, if you're dealing with guns, people's lives, some intense moments, you need at least one psychology course, right? If not 10, to be out there really. You're dealing with people, like you said, in those high-end situations, but we pay them shit, right? I mean, you don't get a lot of money for doing it. You might die doing it. It's some serious hectic hours, right? I mean, it's insane. And so do you think reinforcing on the back end better pay, to equal the degrees that I think we both agree they should have?
I think that is important, but I have come across an issue that I think it overwhelms the issue that you're discussing, and that's I don't think there's enough biologically capable people. Just like where I'm talking about pitchers and quarterbacks, there are physically not enough people in America that can whip 100-mile-per-hour fastball. Physically, those people don't exist, right? So I think you're talking in the Marine Corps, whether it's special operations in there or you're talking about special operators in the military, in the police departments, when you get to these points where you have people who have been in multiple high-stress scenarios and they reacted cool and calm under pressure and made the right decisions, I don't actually think that had anything to do with the training that they had prior to that. I think you're talking about an actual biological issue. People that don't have a fight, flight, or freeze response. Their body just doesn't get triggered, whether their stress doesn't go up that high, or whatever it is. They don't react that way, so they are able to follow their training and able to follow what they know, but that's only because
of their biological precondition. I think that all that stress and all that training, what it does is it weeds out those people in a way that doesn't cause as much harm to society because they're not being trusted yet. You're going through these hard levels of stress, seeing whether you have it or not. I mean, even in the Marine Corps, they kind of talk about that. Do you have what it takes? It's not, can we give you what it takes? We are running you through tests to see if you already have this thing, and this thing is this biological predisposition to not freak out when stressed. An example of this is, I know we will be flooded with the media about narratives left, right, up, and down, but the number one thing that stops school shooters is an unarmed teacher disarming the gunman with their bare hands. And that is because you are talking about a teacher that is not armed with a weapon. They're armed with that biological predisposition to not fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah, so we would need every police department would have to be full of basically the special forces that we could find,
Right.
and run through testing and training and all that. And so even financially speaking, if all that money was there to train these officers to be special forces, biologically they're not programmed to be that because there's so few anyway.
Right. I think it's still an impossible hurdle.
Wow.
So money and training will help you discover who those people are. For instance, right now, I can still go to the job, but you think I'm going to go do that job for 40 grand? That's cute.
Yeah.
You know, if you start throwing 250 on the table, I might get my ass off the couch and figure out a way to lumber around and go back to policing, you know?
Yeah.
So
Could steal a couple of special forces guys that come over.
yeah, they
and start
certainly
paying that
would as
kind of money.
well, you know? So, and even then, which places should really have those type of people? Who, you know, who's even going to make that decision? Who gets those people? So I would.
And do we continue with the militarization of police, right? By bringing in, the
Right.
forces.
Right. So here's what I argue. I would argue that you need people like me, and there's enough of us to fill 2 or 3 SWAT teams in each major city, for sure. So you have those major SWAT teams, and you have a van, 2 vans that are fully armed to the hilt at all points in times, roving around the city. And what happens is regular cops, for the most part, would be unarmed. They're not out there. They're not going to. It's not a comply or die situation. This is if you comply, you're going to get your ticket. If you don't comply and you run away, well, your license plate number and what information we have and all of our cameras are going to go to a detective unit that is fully staffed and ready to not come after you themselves. They're just going to find out who you are, and they're going to send our SWAT teams after you. And it's going to be in those cases where, yes, society is saying comply or die. We are saying you will die if you don't come and do exactly as we're saying. There are those times when that happens. That happens a lot. For every major city, that probably happens 10 to 20 times a night. So in those situations, yeah, we send those.
That's
people
crazy to think
kick ass.
about, man. 10 to 20 times like that sort of episode.
Yeah, that's an average.
That's wild.
Yeah, so in Baltimore, that surely happens, 10 times per shift. There's 9 shifts, 9 districts.
Wow.
So it happens hundreds of times a day in Baltimore.
Yeah. It's I don't think people really realize that, man, until if they really think about that number, right? Because they may read the headline of what happened of something. So this one tragic or two, well, if you watch the local news, right, it's tragedy after tragedy on the local news, right? But and think that that's kind of it, as opposed to 10, 20 other incidents.
Yeah, no matter what we're talking about, the numbers are clear. That I don't care what aspect you're talking about. Still, we're in a situation where 99.99999% of these things resolve without issue, no matter what you're talking about. I argue that when it's our SWAT teams doing this stuff, when it's our elite soldiers that are comply or die situations, that every single death from us is a failure. That's the way it worked for us in Fast Team. If we're doing a hostage rescue in the Marine Corps, if we're doing a hostage rescue, whether the bad guy dies or the hostage dies, we failed our mission. We want to come in there and capture everyone and bring everyone to a state where we all gain more intel, we all treat everybody humanely. That's the goal. So from my critical point of view, I think of all of these, every single one should be considered a failure, even when the officer did everything legally and by procedure. That means our procedures need to change, or we need to know more about what was happening with our suspect. We need to know more about what's happening with our officers when they respond in these situations. It's not like there's always somebody to blame. Sometimes it's just about learning and moving on. I forget, that's another train, but go ahead.
No. You were talking about how you would change it, right? We have unarmed officers not engaging in high intense situations, emergency or special responders to something, responding to these 10 to 20 type events throughout the evening, right? And I think it's important you said what you just said about, if anyone dies, it's a failure. Because I think if someone's thinking militarized vehicle, right, showing up with professional suite, all that really means is it's going to be one shot, not six, right?
Right.
I think that is what some people think, right? My immediate thought was like, okay, you're going to send the pros, so there's only going to be one bullet, and that's a wrap, and it's all over. But really, it's the art of so not one shot is fired.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the art form. We have this thing called, when you want to know why SWAT teams go in with such violence, we have this thing called violence of action. And that means that you hit the house, you go in really hard, really fast, really loud, lights shining, because that sends everybody into a freeze. And you're able to go ahead and it gives you the advantage to handle things safely so that they're going, oh my God, what is happening? Instead of actually reaching for a gun where you will do something. So the reason they do that is because it ends up in less problems. It's just like shooting center mass. A lot of people talk about how police shooting to kill is wrong. But the reason that exists is because yeah, we've kind of made a determination that 5 suspects aren't worth 1 innocent. And if we shoot for anything other than center mass, we're increasing our likelihood that an innocent is shot, and or someone we're not intending to shoot, rather. So, I mean, yeah, are 5 bank robbers worth 1 6-year-old little girl from a skipped bullet? In my opinion, yes. That's up to you guys to determine, but I'll argue that it is.
Yeah, for sure. If it's all you got to do is say if it's at your little girl, then everybody's like, yep, okay, it definitely is. 16 would be fine with some people, right? So do more cops in an area, say call that Baltimore or all? There's a lot of trouble places right around.
Sure.
Do more cops equal less crime? I mean, does a more militarized force and more cops being on the block, does this equal less crime?
There's no correlation between more cops and less crime. There's always the opposite. So, crime is a measurement of police activity, not citizen activity. Crime is what a police officer writes on a piece of paper. It's not an objective measurement of anything. You can just think, how many kids slinging weed in Baltimore have arrest records for possession of weed versus how many Wall Street executives have had cocaine in their pocket and been arrested for it. It's not a measurement of actual crime. It's a measurement of what a cop does. And it's not even just a measurement of what a cop does. It's what a cop claims to have done. And it's our measurement of work. So it's our way of saying that we actually did something at work. So more police always equals more crime as that measurement. Now, does it reduce
more reports
violence?
Being written,
right.
More cops doing things? So yeah, you got more crime. If I had 100 officers, they're all got to write a report, right?
Right. It's like asking if if you hire more burger flippers at McDonald's, will more burgers be flipped? Yeah, duh.
Yeah.
Some of these things are very
But most
simple.
people they just hear a correlation, right? The sheriff says something, right? Crime rates are up or crime rates are down. And they just go, yeah, that's because of more policing or but what you're saying is better policing instead of more policing.
Maybe. I'm saying we don't kind of have those answers more so.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for example, of what these numbers actually are, famously, or we should say infamously, Martin O'Malley came into office in Baltimore. And what he did is he came back and he said, hey, I know that police will be politically influenced to reduce crimes, for instance, from an aggravated assault to just an assault, so it's not a felony, it becomes a misdemeanor. They'll be politically influenced to do things like that. As they go up the chain, they'll be more politically influenced to do things like that. So Martin O'Malley said, let's go back and audit all the records from the last 5 years or so, and then upgrade them to what the report actually said. So he comes in the office and says, look, the crime for the last 5 years was actually way up here. And then he politically pressured all of his officers to reduce the number of crimes for, again, once you're doing the same policy, taking ag assaults down to misdemeanor assaults, things like, you're incentivized as an officer to take a burglary and change it to, trespassing, things like that. And then he said, look at all this crime reduction. But the homicide rate was
Yeah.
still the same. The only numbers that we have that actually mean anything are bodies. That's a hard number. We know how much that is. So there's a lot of correlates that I will go with violence. If we can take the amount of murders, and then we can start making some correlates to the amount of aggravated assaults, and the amount of shootings, amount of stabbings, things like that. But there's really nothing else we can correlate anything to, because crime, like especially procedural crime, is something that isn't entirely done by the police department themselves. I mean, this is not something. Like, I was out of the police department before I really started realizing this myself. I mean, this was doing the research. I'm looking and I'm trying to understand crime numbers, and I'm trying to understand what the data says. And then it's just like, well, wait a minute. If I'm plugging this into an algebra equation, the variable C for crime is being told to me by police. It is not. This is clearly a measurement of police activity. This has nothing to do with what a community is doing. There's no measurement for that. The only measurement we have in that whole thing is murders. That's the only thing that we can say, okay, we have 10 bodies, so clearly there's been 10 homicides. That's it. Everything else is kind of politically influenced bunk.
Yeah, it becomes the police officer's subjective or the political influence to have violent crimes, quote, down, right?
Right.
Or felonies down, right? Because we're charging them with lower crimes, right? Just, I mean, the political moves, but you're right to think about it, that I don't think people do. They just hear crime rate because it's sold to them on local news, right? Even myself. And you're thinking crime rate's down or crime rate's up, right? And all we really are is monitoring how many police reports got written is what happened.
That's
based
exactly,
on
that's a good way to put it. All we're doing is monitoring the amount of reports that have been written. Yes.
Yeah, that's it. And we compare what to the year previous to say up or down.
And what does January 1st have to do with any trend? So, like if two gangs are beefing, is our argument that in January 1st they like reset their beef and they continue on a blank slate and see what happens? Like I don't.
You know that's what somebody was thinking, right? Somebody's you got 1 year of crime. All right, you're right. So the local gang decided the murders were up in February. It was cold outside.
Right.
Right. So and they got but people don't take it further to really look at it, man, and wonder. So I mean, some of the things, right, that we're hearing with this police reform protest, right, which is defund the police, right? This is something we kept hearing. And some people picked up on it, ran with it. Some people say, defund them, take their money away. Some had some solutions to substitute it with community policing, right? Some said sending social workers out. When I heard that, I'm like, you apparently have never met a social worker, because the social workers are burdened with thousands of cases and people they can't get to, completely underpaid. And now you want them to respond to a domestic violence issue, right? Because they know how to talk to them better or something. So I've heard an array of, from defund everybody, community policing only, to more accountability, right? Kind of talk on some of that you're seeing, right? A movement that was meant to, I don't know.
Well, when I got into the movement,
violence.
It was all about making this organization, because why would we ruin this organization that's already created? The infrastructure is already there. So the whole argument was take this infrastructure and make it actually serve the community in the way that everybody idyllically sees it. But then it came to the argument of, we don't need this thing. And I got news for you. That's preposterous. The policing, it doesn't necessarily lower violence, but it certainly keeps a lid on it, and it maintains societal order and structure in ways that go far beyond anything I'm going to be able to tangibly point to. You need some kind of social structure and order. It doesn't necessarily have to be police. If you live in a acidic Jewish neighborhood, well, the elders work. Yeah, of course, but it's because they're going to do pretty much the same shit to you that police do. So yes, you need these things there for when you do need them. I'm all for reallocating funds, trying to change the structure of things to a public health thing, but the idea where we have people that don't know policing nor care to begin to understand it, which makes me question their entire desire to solve any of these issues. I don't really think they want to solve any issues. They just want to have power and be the one.
Hey man,
that changes.
they're a hashtag activist.
There are lots of
Michael,
hashtag
okay?
activists.
Okay, so they know how to restructure and budget and fund for policing and all right.
Right. I mean, of
Okay.
course they do. They obviously have all this experience. I mean, they run huge organizations. They know what it's like to allocate all these funds and to run all these workers. Of course, they know all that stuff. I understand.
I get where it comes from. I can get it because I've had my share of interactions with officers, and not in the positive, right?
Me
I haven't
too.
walked away like it's not been good, man. And a lot of the times it's because I was an asshole, right? And I may have deserved it, right? And there's some times where that was uncalled for, right? You know, so I can get where somebody may have had experience after experience like that, right?
Sure.
And they're going, you know what? I'd rather have nothing and let me police myself with my 9 or my shotgun right at my house or my gang or my family, right? Or my whatever it is. As long as I can remove one enemy off the street, then I only got to worry about my enemies, right? I can see where you could scream that in frustration.
Yeah, and I totally get that. The thing is we've been down that road as a human society. This is where the lords and the that come from. You know, when you think of England and you think of all these little territories and these castles, that is what results when you don't have that layer of overall chaos of organization. Now, is it worth it? I'm going to argue, yeah, but that is definitely a societal issue to argue whether it's worth it or not. But if you have your vision of no police, that means that the strongest of us will occupy territories and we'll all beef with one another over a fight for resources, and we're set civilization back tens of thousands of years. I mean, this is the shit we did before we became very civilized. I mean, I'm all for improving policing, but the idea that 28 unarmed people being killed last year in a city of 300 million that allows everyone to have a gun that wants one, it might not actually be that bad.
Yeah, right. Yeah, God forbid you said that the numbers are there when there's crimes going on by anybody else. But I get it, and most won't play that forward, right? Is to say, let something happen at your house or your car gets stolen, right? What are you going to call the social worker? You know, are you going to wait for the report to come by if your kid comes up missing from a park?
Right.
You know what I mean? And to really play that forward, right?
No, you're not. And I don't expect you to. Because I don't expect the individual to see beyond vengeance. I don't. I reasonably, yes, if somebody rapes my daughter, am I going to go try and kill that person? And will this video be used as evidence for that? Very likely. Should the police try to stop me? Yes. Because society cannot allow vengeance. This is why I want everyone that ever listens to me speak, go back and watch The Dark Knight with a critical eye. This is why Batman is the bad guy. The Joker is the good guy, and it's happening right in front of your face and you don't realize it. Batman is skirting the laws. He's destroying everything. No crime is being solved. He's not stopping the gangs whatsoever. The best he can do is destroy half the damn city, manipulate all the laws, and just make the crime syndicate hide their money a little bit better. The Joker comes in and he does what needs to be taken to actually save Gotham from Batman. And you know, these are things that test your principles. And when the Joker says, "Did you think I would leave the fate of Gotham in a fist fight with you?" Right, that's the whole thing he's talking about. He is the hero of Gotham. Not Batman, not Two-Face, none of it. He saved the city from the tyranny of superheroes.
So who's the Joker in the scenario we're talking about, right? In the
police
program,
are.
is it the communities?
We
the
look
police are,
bad.
okay.
We look bad. We do bad things. But the data is very clear that in the end of the day, this is what maintains the order that is more important for everyone else. It is some part of the thing that the Joker exposed himself. It doesn't matter how bad the plan is, as long as there's a plan. That's a problem why people go along with that. I think our policing plan's pretty bad. But it's like everybody's kind of content as long as there's some kind of plan going on. They don't care how bad it is. I really care about how bad it is. But I can get how it's you can just see, oh, this guy must be the bad guy. Look, they killed 2 unarmed black men last year. Yeah, I get that. And then when you defund the police, 30 black children are killed. What do you want me to tell you? Since you started rioting, literally 30 children, black children, have died during the riots. The police would take decades to kill 30 black children. Decades.
Wow. You keep going, man.
You know,
You're on that
I mean,
cognitive rampage.
I know. I mean, this is just what I'm talking. This is just. It's not like I came. If anybody listens to me from 5 years ago, they're often like, "What is this dude talking about?" And it's like, well, that's what happens when you just research. It's like anybody. If you're even talking about like Middle East involvement, and you're like, "Oh, Trump's a warmonger," you just need to click Google a little bit and find out that the exact opposite is true. I don't know what to say. You know?
Yeah. I mean, it seemed like. When it started, I was like, finally, yeah, we're gonna get some change.
Me
You
too.
know, I'll put the Guy Fawkes mask on and go. You know, I'll be up there with you. And as more and more announcements or lack thereof demands or organization of what needed to change, proposals to it, and then outlandish claims of defund, right? It becomes difficult to back a movement that begin as a sort of a revolution of policing, period, right? Which I do think needs to change. I think there does need to be some sort of cleaning house, and sometimes you got to knock all the pieces off the board, right, and reset it.
Sure.
You know, in some places, right, in some things you can't, but I definitely I loved how the movement started, and then it got trendy. And then I watched people join up into.
You mean when a Black Lives Matter hashtag is on Amazon that you're not bucking the system anymore? Is that what you mean?
Well, yeah, and a lot of suburbia white people are marching, right? That have had nothing but positive experiences with cops, right?
And burning down
have
black neighborhoods. Those ones.
Yeah, and or marching, but you know, I came up in kind of the 90s, right, when there was a lot of shootings. There was a lot of shootings going on in neighborhoods I was around. Bandana colors mattered even more so back then, and people got shot left and right, and you know, all the gangster rap that was coming out talking about what was happening. I didn't see any of those white suburban moms marching.
Right.
I didn't. Right, and it got trendy. And I'm glad that they're out there now, right, and doing and pushing a movement. I think there definitely needs to be some change or some help, but I think defunding it that way is the improper way to go. I think more training is necessary, which takes more money, right, to put it in it. How much are we willing in our own communities to be responsible for our communities too, on top of a police officer's response, right? I mean, I'm down with the change revolution. Let's do it. I mean, but we got to present ideas more than remove all cops from communities.
Yeah, and I'm not the person to even argue about those things. The way I see this is I'm the CEO of the company. You're the shareholders. You argue about what you want policing to be. And if you say I have a $300 million budget, what's the best I can do with it? I'm going to tell you what I can do. But all these decisions should be up to you. I don't like even the idea of authority figures in this realm.
Agreed.
Any central authority figure with policing just turns the police into their personal army. I forget who said it, whether it was de Blasio or Giuliani or whoever. It was one of the New York mayors. Literally said, you know, the NYPD is the eighth largest army that I personally control, or whatever. And it's like, I mean, that's what these things are. They're hands of politicians. That's why I want to move them to the shareholders. I think that this is an argument for you and 6 other people that are fully invested in your community about what you want to do, because these things are going to affect you. If you make a rule, I forget what that principle is called, but there's a principle that if you're making any rules for society, you should be positioning yourself as somebody that's eligible to have any of the results applied to you. You will have no idea on which level of the hierarchy you are on when it comes to this law. So if you're going to be making rules that lock up, you know, kids for having weed in their pocket, it's going to be all kids, not just the rich kid, not just the poor kids, the rich kids and everybody else. These laws are going to go through and apply.
So people start thinking about it a little bit differently and creating laws that they would want to apply to themselves and work that out with their neighbors. You're going to have ups and downs, you're going to have failures, you're going to have learning lessons, but I really think the point is something that we have lost in society is this scientific pathway towards continually improving. Like the Enlightenment stopped. And all scientific progress, especially philosophically, has really hit a dead end. We thought, I think a lot of people thought we were going somewhere with the new atheist movement, and then that totally crumbled as they all got Trump derangement syndrome. But we don't have this critical thinking or actually scientific pathway. It's like, what team are you on? Are you team red or team blue? Or are you team individual or team collective? And that's about all that we have right now, and we're not advancing. I hate the idea that like the idea that my ass is the first person to put together an alternative policing that's backed by science and written it out is embarrassing.
Well, because Michael, because it's a bad business plan.
It's a terrible business
right
plan.
now,
Terrible.
what they got right now shows profit, growth,
Right.
privatized prisons. People are making money right now. Probation officers are getting paid every week.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Guys are indentured servitude right now, serving community service hours, and there's way too much money in this. I mean, why would you write a different business plan?
Right. I mean, so there's a great example of my frustration right there that you just hit on, which was these, let's call them indentured servants that are in prison. And I just watched all the black people who claim to care about all the people who claim to care about Black Lives Matter and police reform literally argue to vote for the people that have done all these things. And so my mind is kind of blown. I mean, Kamala Harris literally kept people in prison so that they would fight fires and risk their lives for dollars a day.
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't understand how we're in this place where we're blaming the officer while the people elect into power the people who tell the officers to do those things.
Well, it's easy. It's easy to blame the cop because I watched it on the video. That's who choked him. I can point. I can point at it. I can point at it. It's the video I see. But you make an argument though that let's take anybody and drop them in that training system, put them in a similar scenario, right? Maybe 50% don't, maybe 70% don't, maybe 30% do, right? That follow. And as much as blaming that one cop, I do think some cops do need to be held more accountable.
Sure.
I think some get off because of that amendment of the discretion, and that happens.
Right. I don't think
So
you should
I think
keep your
maybe
job, but
accountability.
I also have a problem with punitive things for an employee. I do have a problem with that. Unless you have flat out murder, I don't know. I feel like it's something society has to eat. And it sounds bad, but
Well, it's hard in today's society, man, because that video goes viral, right? And 150 million people see it in a week, right? And then it's you can't stop that turn of this has to change, right? Or that has to change, right? You could probably take a lot of videos of things that happen, right? Show a homeless man, right? You see the same idea. This has got to change, right? Show someone die of cancer because there's no cure for it, right? There's a million things we could push a pull for, right?
good point.
And I think, I don't know. I'm with you. I'm like, I don't know how to make it better, right? Because without the cops, you don't want this Mad Max version
Right.
of what life is without the cops. You really don't. And then you don't want to militarize everybody, right? So I
Right.
feel like I'm losing my freedoms, and because I've felt that way before. I've had cops
Well,
come
I
to
mean,
my
think
my
about
house.
this. Let me
tell
just
you know?
interrupt for this one thing because it drives
Yeah,
me
no, go ahead, babe.
insane.
Go ahead.
Body cameras. So we want to argue for something that only tells the story from the cop's perspective.
What he sees. What
Okay.
she sees.
Okay. That seems like a really weird place to start.
Yeah.
And what do we do? What was that going to end to? That's going to end in facial recognition being attached to body cameras. I'm sorry, it can sound crazy in 2020, but come 2025, everybody's going to be like, yeah, well, duh, of course they would do that. We need to stop terrorists.
Yeah, and now it runs your face, scans you,
That's
pull
all I'm
right
saying.
up. Now
Yeah, it run warrants
Yeah,
on you
now
just
you're
when
in
you
the
show your
system.
face in public.
turn into Demolition Man all of a sudden, right? It's gonna get nuts.
I'm just not into that. Like, I'm not. I think everything is a tool, and it's who has the tool that and the power over the tool that matters. If you just give
the current system of policing more tools, they're going to use those same tools to continue the incentives that all officers have, which is to put people in prison. They're literally hired to put people in prison. I mean, I don't know how to get past it, but everything that I achieved in policing was directly correlated to the fact that I put a lot of mofos in jail. That's why I got cool assignments. That's why I was in Major Case Squad. If I would have been doing things, by the moral book the whole time, would I have been there? Hell no. But I didn't join policing to handle freaking 911 calls all day long. I want to do real detective work. And how do you get the real detective work? You demonstrate that you know how to put people in prison. That's how you get to do real detective work. So, I mean, every tool you're going to give me, guess what I'm going to use it for? Figuring out how to put more people in prison. This is what I'm saying. Like, in the business world, this is like, duh. It doesn't matter what your policies and procedures are. Whatever you reward your employees for, that's what they will do. Whatever you or disincentivize your employees to do, they will tend to not do those things.
How about a prize for somebody with the least amount of speeding tickets?
Right. Even my big argument, and I had supervisors stand up for me, but it didn't ultimately matter. When I was in this one neighborhood, it was a pretty small area, and I was able to, just being really active, I was able to lock that place down. Now, nothing happened while I was there, pretty much ever. I never took Part 1 felony crimes. So if it's a felony, I never took any of those offenses, things that would be reported to the FBI. They just didn't happen when I was working. And I would get in trouble for it because I wasn't locking people up. So I would just leave my district, I would leave my sector and go lock people up. I did that when I worked in really rich, nice neighborhoods because you can, even if they are being criminal, one of the thing about owning property and having fences and stuff like that, it's really hard to catch you doing anything. If you have 20 people coming over your house and you sell cocaine to them out of your townhouse, everyone's going to notice. If 20 people drive into your gated community and buy a pound of weed and leave, no one's ever going to notice.
No.
So you have those issues where I would then go to other neighborhoods to get my arrest stats. And then if I really locked down my area, well, I actually didn't even want to arrest people in my area because that would have to generate a crime that occurred in my area. So
now crime rates are going up in good areas, man. You're ruining property values.
At that time, I was naive and I was thinking my job is to keep crime down. So I didn't want I didn't want to, it's just a disorderly call, right? So say, we all know these kind of things where somebody's kind of being an ass and then the cop escalates the situation and then the person reacts and then you're like, haha, now I got a free arrest because you overreacted. That literally happens. But I was never going to do that in my neighborhood because then I would have generated the crime of disorderly conduct occurring, and I was taking pride in not having crime on my post, which is weird because I was the one that determined whether crime took place on my post or not.
And you're the ones making the reports.
Right, I didn't really see it that way. At that time, I only saw it as like shootings and violence and things like that you could avoid, and I didn't even, at that time, I was such a rookie that the idea that I wouldn't write a burglary report seemed crazy. But, 5 years into it, I was talking people out of burglary reports, and I was saying, do you really want to make this burglary report? When you sell your house, they're going to pull up the crime stats, and they're going to see that there was a burglary, not just in this block, but literally in this house. You want me to file a burglary report and reduce your property value by $30,000? And they'd be like, no, nothing happened here. And I'd be like, all right, peace. Yeah.
Yeah, never mind, right? I mean, I think people start digging and maybe realize it's so much, and it's rooted from how we put people in jail, our legal system, how people are judged, how they're moved like cattle through courts every day, and pleading.
And you don't see that. Importantly, cops don't see that.
Yeah.
So police, I'm only putting the handcuffs on, and you disappear. That's one reason why I think we get a little bit dehumanized as well, is I don't know what happens. I don't know the fallout. All I do is get a court case in the mail 4 months later. Odds are it gets postponed a couple of times, and then there's a plea deal. And I have no idea what happened to that person. I've never seen the courtroom. I never talked to an ASA. All I did was put handcuffs on them, and they disappeared.
Yeah, so they don't get to see that aspect of it too. I think just there's so much involved that I think people started to just kind of go, it's all screwed up. Just defund everything and no cops, right? Because the more you have to dig into it, the more data you look up, the more confusing it gets. Then this is linked to that. Everything is linked. You know, it's become a code, right? I changed 1 0 in the code and I got a whole different thing going. You know, that where do you start, right? I mean, do you start at the legal system, the laws, the way we police, how we police, right? And you know, everyone's going to have their different ideas. But I like what you're bringing to the table is not what you're bringing. What I see is more of a framework
Exactly.
for local communities to adapt.
This is
So
how
I'll
this is
take
the
a
table for
framework,
your ideas, not your
yeah, and
idea.
take that
I'm not the
framework, get
ideas.
the community involved.
Right.
Rather than say just do A, B, and C, and people can't take that,
I
Michael, because
can't.
your plan doesn't. You can't go on a Fox or CNN and hit your sound bites in 38 seconds unless you got my plan is this, this, and this, and I'll fix everything. They can't say, well, here's a framework and allow the local community to adopt that framework and police it as they see fit for the local community.
Yeah, in a perpetually evolving iterative-based system, which evolves with time and changing.
Yeah,
I can't even talk like that, you know? Like, it just doesn't work.
Right. But yeah, you can. You need bullet points for people to pay attention, right? Because we have attention spans of gnats, right? So unless we can read, you know, the top 5 things I would change, right? We don't know who the hell we're voting for. Most of us don't know foreign policy. We just know it's a phrase or a turn of, right? And we hear things. So the same ideas, we look for ideas for this, and we're looking for this one size fits all, which I think what you're really bringing out to light here is that there is not, that the community police itself, that each situation is up to the cop, right? The ones running that district or that area. You have to build more of a framework that has some plasticity and adaptable to those in place.
Right, and even if you talk about, there's kind of a central framework of American society, but little areas have different things. For example, in Baltimore, dirt biking, illegal dirt biking, is a huge thing. Anybody, 12 o'clock boys, if anybody wants to look it up and see what it actually is. But that's a huge thing, and so you would have to deal with that in a certain way in your policing, in a way that made everybody happy, or at least something that the community settled on. But that wouldn't even be an issue, you know, in Bismarck, North Dakota, or something. So why would Bismarck, North Dakota, ever give a crap about, you know, illegal dirt biking? It's just literally not a thing.
Right.
So you have all those just kind of little things that make your community a certain way, or you want to do things and respect that culture and that history. In some ways, the things that you're allowed to do and not allowed to do actually make cities unique and different. You know, not having prostitution in certain areas of Nevada gives them something unique to distinguish themselves as part of the world. I mean, it sounds weird, but that's literally their local culture, and you need to account for all of those things. I'm definitely talking about the framework and how policing should be, and I'll argue with you about the numbers and what things are. But I think a lot of this is a lot of learning, and I'm not sure how to actually get it to people or have them want to take it in. I mean, maybe all truths that way. Humans just don't really try to face reality. We're trying to avoid it all point in times. Evolution really is survival of the avoidance of reality. It sounds weird, but
AKA cognitive dissonance, right?
So,
you know what I mean?
The concept there is that, so a basic way to think of it is if there's something in a bush, a honey badger's in a bush about to kill you, and you decide as some kind of caveman to go over there and see whether the honey badger is in there, you decide to go investigate reality. Well, you get attacked by a honey badger, you die, and you don't procreate. But if you avoid it finding reality, you actually survive and then will procreate and create another creature that doesn't want to find reality, because reality is almost sure to kill you. Everything we have is a very limited perspective and is not reality at all. For instance, you look at a flower, you think, oh, it's bright and yellow and it's cute, but the reason it's yellow is actually because bees see an ultraviolet, and that color just happens to be correlated to the ultraviolet color that they're giving out, and they don't give a damn about the color of their flowers. It's just a weird thing that happens to be that we like the color that bees see in ultraviolet light, a thing that we can't even see. So us and the bee are living entirely two different realities realities, neither of them reality, because he's not seeing our light spectrum, we're not seeing his light spectrum, and then there's a whole bunch of other light spectrums none of us are ever seeing that actually exist in reality. Rage Against the Machine, though what is that line? The air is empty though it fills the air with radio is silent though it fills the air with noises. I mean, if you could actually see reality, you would see Wi-Fi and radio signals bouncing everywhere. Lasers would be going crazy. Sound waves would be shaking everything. Like, you couldn't exist. Reality would literally overwhelm you and kill you. So I think I kind of do that to people when they say things like, the police are disproportionately killing unarmed black males. Not true. I hate to tell you guys this, but the argument that black males are only 8.5%, or less than that, they're roughly 6.5% of the population in America. So the idea that they compromise roughly 50% of the unarmed killings by police is wrong. No, police do not respond to demographics. By that mere argument says that if police killed 100 people, 15 of them should be children and 10 of them should be elderly senior citizens. That doesn't make any goddamn sense at all. Police do not respond to demographics. Police respond to violence. So as long as 6.5% of the population is committing 53% of the violation, it's actually disproportionate that they are less than 50% of the killings. If you talk about violence, which is really what police are there for, white females are by far the most disproportionate victim to police violence. There are tens, if not hundreds, of white females who have been killed at the hands of police in this country, and almost zero white female murderers, and definitely none that have killed police.
Holy shit, but you can't say that shit, man.
I know, but all I'm doing is relaying the numbers, and I don't know what that has to, how the facts of the scenario, if they get in the way of the solutions.
It doesn't push an extreme agenda.
Right.
It doesn't push an extreme one side or the other, right? Mm-hmm. When really to argue would be let's fix those neighborhoods where these crimes are taking place, right? And let's put money into those neighborhoods. You know what I mean? Let's do that. Let's fix the neighborhood where the crimes are taking place and try to help the neighborhoods out, whether it's through job, education, right? Maybe less jail, right?
Sure.
Forgiving sentences, right? Maybe the money really goes into not only changing police and its structure and how that's done, but also into the communities, because it seems that
just disincentivizing criminal arrest by cops. So what happens is the cops respond to violence, right? So I'm sent to an area that has had shootings. So literally what happens is I'm sent to an area where the 6.5% of black, or the 6.5% of the population, that's not even fair, where this less than 1% of black males are committing a ton of violence. So I'm sent to that area. And then because we isolate ourselves and we segregate ourselves in our society, some of it ourselves, some of it because of the echoes of slavery and things in housing projects and policies and welfare, all of that, absolutely, of course. But because of a scenario outside of police control, where there are a bunch of other poor black people surrounding the violent black people, the police respond to the violent black people's area, and then those other people who are minding their own business, the 99% of black people in those neighborhoods, they are around cops who are being paid to catch crime, make arrests, and report criminal statistics up. So while I'm sitting there looking for someone committing a murder, I see someone selling drugs, just like they sell drugs on Wall Street, or just like they jaywalk somewhere else, but I'm there, and that is my job. So I will arrest somebody that I see doing these offenses, which means the non-violent black people are double victims. And they are mostly victims from these people who were crying about the police killing and having attention put to, which, I mean, I know this all gets hard, but I mean, the street doesn't talk like the news talks. I promise you the street talks the way I talk. There's a few mofos, keeping my language in check, who cause and double victimize all the people in those neighborhoods. The black grandmother that's calling the police wants that bad kid out of that area, and it would improve the things for everybody else. But the police aren't very good at doing their job, and it's not a very good system that's very effectual. But so we keep doing it and we double victimize everybody else in the process. It's actually twice as bad. And then when I see the people that are actually the source of this response, who actually victimize these neighborhoods, being the ones that are glorified, it becomes very hard for me to kind of participate, if that makes sense.
No, it certainly does, man. It would be glorifying those that bring that sort of violence or tension or something to the community itself. I wonder how much of it too is the patrolling, right? Is because like the arrests make it good, right? So you go to places where crime is happening, right? So you can go get the arrest.
Well,
so you can move
violence.
up
I
in
mean,
the
we don't know
rankings.
where crime is occurring.
That's
Violence.
violence.
It's very different, right?
Yeah, that is true. That's important to point out, right? Because crime is just where a report was written and by a cop, right? That violence really is where that comes from, and we all know it, right? We joke about the hood, right? And going to one or being trapped there or from there, right? I mean, I was born in Pine Hills as a young kid, raised on the other side of Ocoee, so I went from like extreme hood side, if you will, in urban development to a very redneck side, and I'm saying that word. It was violent on that side too.
Sure.
You know, on both sides. And I saw police arrest my friends as equally in Pine Hills as in Ocoee, and commit violence as well. But we also knew where you didn't go in Pine Hills, right? And where you would be shot quickly, in other areas too. And it's like, I think it just becomes too easy, man, to point a finger at somebody, a race even, and blame a race and blame a culture, and it becomes some sort of virtual signaling aspect that turns into some trendy movement, you know, that sounds really good, right? But as you're saying, has so much emptiness behind it that nobody really wants to talk about what can we really do, right? And I love that's what you're bringing. You're bringing a lot to the table. That pointing out is not only here's a lot of issues with the way that you're measuring it, the way you see it, the way you're patrolling it, the way it's processed. But here's a system that we can do and implement all over that will customize itself based on the citizens. I love your idea of a board, a rotating board. I've often said that the President of the United States should be like jury duty. You get picked, and it's your fucking
That's right.
It's your year.
That's what I mean. And it should be like a service thing, like
Yeah, you're
almost
like,
like
shit.
jury duty, like. Damn!
Shit, I got to be the president this year. I didn't want to.
I'm gonna make $100,000 more than I thought I was gonna make, but damn.
Damn. Right. I got to serve. Right. And maybe citizens serve in a community. Right. Maybe you know, you have to go put in 1 or 2 years riding along or learning the community, right, of what that's like.
Unarmed.
Similar.
Yeah, I've talked about that.
Yeah, unarmed.
I wanted to have
I like your idea of unarmed cops.
I figured the academy needs to be a lot longer, so you do things like literally make the cops unarmed, drive an ice cream truck around that gives out free ice cream sandwiches. I mean, it wouldn't cost shit.
Something.
Right.
Yeah. How long is police academy before you're on the street with a gun?
6 months.
Shit.
And it's
6 months.
Yeah, so you're literally, I mean, think about what they're trying to say. You're trying to say that this person's supposed to be, like, no CPR. They're supposed to psychologically control these complicated and complex situations. They're supposed to respond under fire. They're supposed to be able to write and read English, which they can bear. I mean, pull up most police reports. You will be shocked at the level of English that is being brought to you. You know, I just spent so many times looking at reports being like, come on, you guys got to be kidding me. You got to know the difference between there and there before we begin. I mean, this is going to be a court document.
See, that it scares the shit out of me, man. That at any point in time, I don't look like the nicest guy, right? And you catch me on a night where I've had a few drinks, I'm pretty loud, right? And I can hang out, but it scares me to think that a 23-year-old could be called to come talk to me because I'm too loud.
Yes.
And he's got a firearm, and he's had 6 months of training, and he's 3 inches shorter than me. You know what I mean? That terrifies me. Oh my God, that is no way that should be happening, man. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the 23-year-olds, the 27-year-olds respond to training they've had.
Sure.
And I've never been there, but maybe you could answer it. But I can see some cop training and some alpha male dude going, listen, man, don't take it easy out there, right? They'll run over you, right?
Oh, they do, for sure.
Or somebody pushing you. Yeah, I can see that alpha stuff going on. But then that guy's probably seen his partner be shot, right, or killed, right? And man,
but I mean, some of the street code is that way. We can't think that. I mean,
What a
Yeah.
reason why you might have been calling me a pig is because I was certainly playing in the mud. I mean, this shit was gray. The good guys and the
Yeah.
bad guys, there wasn't much difference between us. There was
Yeah.
a lot of money on the line for both sides. We were doing shit that, I mean, I would pick out the baddest looking dude I could find, and I would make him my worst enemy. And that person would fear me, and if that person feared me, so would the whole rest of the neighborhood. Uh,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
know, that's the way some neighborhoods are in their current movement. Should we be changing that? Of course, but sometimes, I mean, we can. I think the vast majority of people that went and actually into a high violence area, they would cower away from the prospect of ever working those streets in a flash.
Yeah, yeah. And that's why I think maybe more focused on helping the direct communities along with your structure of restructuring a police department to be ran by a community, by a board of rotating citizens, so no one gains too much power, right? Not making decisions based on political influence, right? Arrests based on political influence, right? Unprivatizing prisons possibly in a way, right? But I love that start, man. And somebody's got to say it and come up with something that's more realistic, more logical, applicable, right? And is responding to actual numbers as opposed to talking points like crime rates and crime statistics.
Sure, like especially when it comes to what causes crime. My idea is that these I would argue to this board that police should be fighting the things that cause crime. And one reason why the number one thing that causes crime or violence, let's not say crime, it's very touchy when it comes to terminology,
Yeah.
but is the mere fact of the political tie-in that you're talking about. You have 4-year goals, maybe 8-year goals when it comes to politicians. But some people are going to hear me say this and they're going to be like, oh yeah, I've seen that before. No, I totally get that. And then some people's mind gets blown. But the largest correlate to violence that we have in world history is lead poisoning. There's nothing close to being tied in with violence than children being poisoned by lead. They have to be children. It doesn't work when you've been poisoned as an adult.
Holy shit. What? I thought you were going to say poverty. I was sure you were going to say
Poverty is not
or-
remotely correlated to violence.
Holy shit.
Not remotely. It's actually inversely correlated.
Really?
Right. So we have to get out of our perspective of America because poverty is almost non-existent in America for real. So if you think about a tribe in Africa, almost zero crime, zero violence. When you start getting organized
Yeah.
is when it steps
Fair
in. As long as everyone is poor, then it's fine. The problem is actually inequality. So
the disproportionate.
right, the
economic
disproportionality is the problem, not actually being poor. If everyone's poor, no one gives a shit. But if you're poor or at least in relation, you're looking up at Jeff Bezos, and you're in your core as a human being. For some reason, there's something triggered that says this is not right, and that is certainly correlated to violence as well. I put that in the third category, which is unequal access. You can say inequality when it comes to resources. It's not just money, because if it was water, the same thing would take place. It's to the resources, and the more essential the resource becomes, the stronger correlation there is to violence. But I actually even think that that's probably aggression, not violence, which is a whole nother issue. Violence to me is biological malfunctions. Aggression is when you've made a logical decision to do something that appears the same as violence. So if a Nazi soldier and an American soldier are in a fist fight, from the observer, there's no distinction. But one side is being violent and the other side is being an aggressor, doing what they feel they have to do. And most likely in reality, the Nazi soldier is too, being an aggressor, just been manipulated. So there is a big difference between, like, say somebody goes crazy and just kills their whole family. That's violence. If for some reason a drug dealer was out to kill you and you decided to kill him first, that is we need to handle those things in separate manners. But with this lead poisoning thing, anybody can look it up. You just type into Google lead and violence. That's all you have to type. You don't even have to type anything else. And then go to images, and you'll see all the charts. A child is poisoned by lead, and then they lose their impulse control. They're literally biologically affected. They're poisoned.
It makes them more violent. It makes them lose impulse control. It makes them have a lower IQ, so less prospects in life. That kind of has a circular effect. And then by time, what happens is they actually become more violent throughout their whole lives. But once they're the 16 to 24-year-old male, then they become physically capable of doing violence that reaches the level of authorities, and thus the crime starts being recorded. So you'll see an 18 to 20-year delay, and then you'll see crime drop. This is why crime dropped in the nation after the late 90s. That's because in 1974, the CAFE standards went in and got let out of the gasoline out of the air. So then by the time 1994, 1995 hit, we started to have that reduction in overall violence throughout the country. In New York City became the safest city in America because they got their lead levels to the lowest in the world. So now when their children grow up, they're vastly less likely to grow up and commit violence when they're older. And once that paid off, that's when you saw the reduction in there. Currently, right now, Iraq and Yemen are the only two countries that continue to use leaded gasoline. And we just wrapped up a war in Iraq, and there's currently a war going on in Yemen. Even terrorism is probably most likely correlated to lead poisoning.
Holy shit. You just saved the bomb for last, bro.
Well, I mean, this actually isn't a bomb in the science.
Yeah, that's insane, man. And most of the lead poisoning in America with the poison is that water, gasoline, paint based, like
right. So now largely it's out of the air, so we have that cleared up. So that's why we had the national reduction. So I mean, even if you think about, there was some kind of claim that like policing got better in the late 90s and caused crime reduction. Like that could, you're making the argument that around the entire world, every single police department in America increased their effectiveness by 25%. Like, come on, that's preposterous.
Right, yeah, it's astronomical, yeah.
Right, so the same thing in New York. I mean, things are going up right now because other things have stepped in and overwhelmed it, their local instability. But so what happened is one reason why there's racial disparities in crime and in violence is because we had white flight. And this is very coincidental, but when white flight occurred and white people, and it's still largely people with resources, moved out into the suburbs, when they started building those those houses were built with PVC pipes. And so it's the copper pipes and the leaded pipes that poison the water. The poisoning doesn't take place. It's just the same thing in Flint. The poisoning isn't in the water, and it's not in the sewers. It's not in the system that the city owns. It becomes poison when it enters the house because of the structure of the house itself. So the lead poisoning and the paint is another way. It also gets into the environment in the dirt. In a lot of areas where there's industrial things, you start getting it into the actual soil. So, I mean, if police focused on landlords and things like that and actually focused on the cause of lead poisoning, you would have a 20-year delay. So almost zero of the cops that worked on it would get any reward.
Yeah, you can't do that. It doesn't help my crime rates for my next election.
This is why you must be in charge, because you care about your city in 20 years. I mean, look, I'm in Phoenix now. Yeah, what do I care about Baltimore? I mean, honestly, I'm not invested.
Care about where you live.
So if they want to pay me to go do policing, I will still do very good at that and serve you as you want. But this is your city. I'm just a tool. I'm just somebody that can do the job for you. That's it. You guys have to all do these things yourself, like lead poisoning, which is the biggest issue. I mean, fatherless homes are a big issue too. So, I mean, these are things we have to focus on as a society, but cops can't make you have dedication to fathers being in the home. We can certainly stop arresting ones and putting them in prison for some bullshit offenses. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that I agree with, man. I mean, perhaps what we are experiencing are just really the symptoms now, right, of some things in place that needed change a long time ago.
I agree. I call it the echoes. There's a lot of echoes, and we can't deny those echoes. It's not like racism doesn't have an effect, but the effect is echoes. It's not the cops now. I mean, again, as I started this interview or discussion, interview is a stupid word. I couldn't fathom how I was working for a black police department with an entire black chain of command in a black city with black coworkers, and racism was the problem. That obviously doesn't.
Yeah,
make sense.
It seems to be the too easy to point at, but what it's like messing with, like, I don't know, dry eyes and you got COVID. You know what I mean? Like You got some serious shit going on deep inside that you have to treat and work through and be healthy to do so, right?
Right. Bitch about
But
your
it
eyes
seems like
watering all you want. I mean, you're fucking missing the
yeah.
point. Right.
Yeah, right. That's what I think, and I think that unfortunately, right, that I think that also pushed some supporters of a movement away from it.
Definitely did.
Is when it began to take a change that way. That some supporters were saying, well, it's hard to stand behind what we're asking for now, saying defund everything, pull, some ridiculous responses. Although understandably, um, it's what started as something beautiful that I pulled my Guy Fawkes mask out turned into a marketing standpoint that was pushing Hollywood issues
Yep.
and pushing that as opposed to really making change or really trying to dive down and go deeper than what it looks like on the video we all watch that makes it's appalling to watch,
Right.
as opposed to an initiative to change piping in certain neighborhoods,
Right.
right? To
Yeah. How do you make that connection in any kind of reasonably quick fashion? Right. That's a good point.
Yeah, no, I mean, but focusing on things possible, right? The
Right.
structure of police, how it's done, how it's set up, as opposed to just pointing out as going, well, you know what? If it was the reverse, if it was a pit bull that bit somebody, most of the people would say it's the owner.
That's a
The
good
owner
point.
made the
Yes.
pit bull that. It's not it's the owner, right? And so that's possibly what we need to be looking at cops is going, hey, they're pit bulls, but hey, they're owners who are training in the business they're in.
Right.
They're teaching him to be that pit bull, right?
I
We
feel
can
the
really see
exact
that.
same way. I'm like, guys, you guys spent literally millions of dollars in the first 5 years of my adult life making me into a pit bull, and then you got mad at me for it.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, it's similar. I mean, soldiers they went through that, right? World Wars One, Two, Vietnam,
Sure,
right? We
sure.
became that and fought for freedom. You come back and you're somebody different, right? We need you when we want you to sign up, and then when you're done, holler at me at the VA when you can get in,
Right,
right?
totally.
Right. It's the same issue, and I think we need to be smarter, and like you're saying, to say, look, what we can see on the video is what we can point at. That person made a discretionary call based on training they've had and what they were ordered to do, which is also wrong. The system is wrong. The order is wrong. That is wrong. His training was wrong. All of it was fucking wrong.
Right.
And as much as we want to get our pitchforks and string the dude up, right, it's not going to change shit. And we started this by saying I haven't seen shit change.
Totally.
We're asking for cops to be more accountable, maybe defund some police. All of this uproar, all of this shit, and we've come out of it with like, well, I hope COVID goes
Well,
away
you know
soon.
what? I think we both got to go because I actually have another interview. I don't know why I have two interviews
Yeah,
today.
do your thing, man.
But I think I want to just leave us with a positive note when it comes to
Yeah, let's do
change.
that.
And I've always been saying that wars are won by ideas. They're not won by any amount of. You can temporarily win by force, but I mean, you can occupy a country. It's only. I mean, if somebody came in here, like China and the whole world teams up and they occupy America. I mean, you can technically occupy it. I mean, if you want, but it's only going to be a matter of time before you can't stand the guerrilla tactics anymore.
Yeah.
So where that's going to is policing in America there's been some kind of ideological victory. I haven't seen many procedural victories or policy victories. But when we started taking count of the killings, The Guardian had to do this famously. Police do not have to report their killings because justified killings are not reported to the FBI. It's a side note, but that's what I always talk to when gun people say, well, there's been so many self-defenses. I'm like, actually, you're just making that up because it's a justified killing. Justified killings aren't reported. But so since The Guardian started keeping track by following newspapers, about 5 years ago, we were looking at almost 1,400 times that police killed somebody in the line of duty in America for the year. So 1,400 times. But last year, it's been a continuing downtrend. And last year, we didn't even hit 1,000. So this is a drop-off of roughly 400 police killings per year that has occurred in the last 5 years. And this is in a situation
Nearly 50%.
where the population went up. So even if the number was stagnant, that's improving. the number has actually gone down 400. So you're talking at least in reality a 50% drop off.
Yeah,
That's
so
significant.
Yeah, that's huge. That's 50% people are still alive.
Right. I mean,
man.
that is freaking
And
significant, and that's just been in the idea being sown into cops, and that's why. If the last thing to freak people out and leave them with is the recent Harvard study that proved that police in America are more likely to shoot a white person than a black person. It's just, I mean, I don't know. That's just numbers by the amount of interactions. So that idea has, whether, I mean, you can see how it's sewn into this inverse correlation, because all crime, all violence is interfamiliarity. So it's almost all people that you're familiar with, people that look closer to you, or is more likely to be a committed crime. White on black crime is almost non-existent. Statistically, it just isn't a thing. Black on white crime, a lot more of a thing, but that's a separate subject.
Yeah.
But things are kept in a familiar fashion. So this has gone so far that it's probably in every black cop's head, because there's no distinction whether it's a white cop or a black cop shooting. In every cop's head, there is this narrative: don't shoot the black guy. Dangerously, sometimes that means it's okay to shoot the white guy. But
unfortunately, yeah. But I am glad that is there now, because that means me too.
Right.
That means me too. You know, so, and it means I got to think twice before I pull a gun on the guy.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Before I take it that far. So if it's done that, at least we got, that's a positive note.
I think there's lots of positives, but the positives don't give power or credit to any individual. And I think that's something that you were hitting on earlier that seems to be hard for us to, is like, rule by council seems very hard for us to actually adapt to. I think we see that when we argue about our governmental system now, where representative, which is a rule by council. So we kind of argue for democracy. I will argue day in and day out that democracy is for retards. I mean, you don't leave things up to it's literally a logical fallacy to leave things up to a popularity contest. I mean, Galileo died in house arrest because nobody believed him that we were circling the sun. I mean, these are things that we shouldn't really be governing by. We need to govern by trusting our certain people and kind of cycling it in, like you were saying, and making it so that it's just people that are actually committed to the areas. And a lot of things do improve, but I think improvements get swept under the rug as well.
I agree, man.
All right, brother, I gotta get out of here.
Man.
Shut this thing down however you see fit.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you joining, man, and chat with you later.
All right, brother, be safe out there.
See you, man.